It's strange how we as a society don't have more and better answers for what adult lives look like for people with disabilities. People with disabilities are human. They have parents and families who are humans and love them and deserve respect and decency and humanity.
That's Craig Thomas. You might not know his name, but you definitely know his work. He co-created How I Met Your Mother, and he's also been a writer on American Dad, The Late Show with David Letterman, made music for Sesame Street, and even written for The New Yorker.
There are really colorful, wonderful ways to describe something that is absurd, stupid, ridiculous, hypocritical, hapless. There are so many funny ways to talk about those things without resorting to this incredibly easy punching down, outdated way of calling something those things.
If you've been listening to the last two episodes of Hyperfocus, you've already heard from Craig, as we looked at how language, and especially the R word, echoes through comedy, culture, and everyday life. But this episode is about a lot more than that word. It's about Craig's journey as the father of a child with disabilities. Because 18 years ago, while Craig was running a hit TV show, his son Elliot was born with a rare genetic condition called Jacobsen syndrome, which causes physical and developmental disabilities. And his life and perspective changed forever. It'll be no surprise to anybody that Craig is very funny, but he's also a really thoughtful person when it comes to parenting, disability, language, and media. And he has a unique perspective on what it feels like to look back at the culture that you helped shape and make the choice to do things differently. And another reason we wanted to talk to Craig is because he recently tried his hand at something new, a novel. It's called That's Not How It Happened, and it's inspired by his family's story, a story that, like this episode, is as much about music and humor as it is about fear and love.
He's not reducible to WebMD page of symptoms. He is not reducible to the R word. He is not reducible to anything because he is a beautiful human being.
I'm Ray Jacobsen, and today on Hyperfocus, a longer conversation with Craig Thomas.
So How I Met Your Mother ended 10 years ago. I lived in Los Angeles. I'm from New York originally. And my wife and I and my writing partner, Carter, we all went to college together. We moved out to LA and we lived there for like 12 years, about 10 of which were doing How I Met Your Mother. But we moved back here when the show ended. And part of what happened during the run of the show, we had our son in between year 2 and 3 of How I Met Your Mother, and we had no idea what was going to happen. We had no idea in utero that he would be born with what turned out to be a very rare genetic syndrome. With all of these challenges, we'll get into it. Health challenges, he needed open heart surgery at 2 weeks old. And then we only found out after the open heart surgery that it was all part of this larger syndrome called Jacobsen syndrome. Not spelled exactly like your last name, Ray. Your last name is
Swedish
Jacobsen.
way, right?
It's the
S-E-N.
Swedish way. Yes, It was discovered by a Swedish doctor, so well played. Yes, that's who discovered it, named after Jacobsen in Sweden, Dr. Jacobsen, but we say Jacobsen here. It's this really complicated, rare syndrome. It's a deletion of part of one of the 11th chromosomes. And it has medical ramifications and developmental, intellectual ramifications, all kinds of things. And and yet I still had to be running this comedy TV show every week. It was this really interesting balance. I was living an hour drama show at home and then driving to work and doing a sitcom. It was just the weirdest thing. I was like a full slate of content, dramatic and comedic content. My wife and I really wanted to move back where we had family support, where we were from. So that's what we did at the end of How I Met Your Mother. And professionally since then, for one thing, we had another kid. So I have my daughter, Celia. She's 9. And she's neurotypical. She's a healthy, precocious little girl. She's different from her brother, and yet they connect quite beautifully, the two of them. Despite this 9-year age gap. My son just turned 18, which is a whole other conversation, right?
I have so many questions. With disabilities. I have a 7-year-old, yeah.
Yeah. And so my daughter's 9, my son is 18, and we moved back here. And part of my mission after moving back, one of my missions was to not be such a workaholic and be more available to, say, have a second child and be with my children, because running a TV show is such a full-time job, so all-consuming. We didn't know we were about to become the parents of a child with a disability, and suddenly you are. And there were 6 more years of How I Met Your Mother to do, or however many more years. And it was a lot. It was a lot to juggle.
Oh my gosh.
So since then, I have had part of my mission, besides finding more balance, has been finding ways to write about this experience of becoming the parent to my son, Elliot, and all of the challenges and fears that came with that, and all of the massive, beautiful gifts that have
Yeah.
come from being Elliot's dad. I tried for a few years in TV and film to do projects that incorporated aspects of that part of my life. And it's really hard to get Hollywood to greenlight TV shows or movies about those topics sometimes. Came very close on a couple things. There's still one that I'm still trying to push up the hill a little bit. This is a very long answer to what am I doing now? What am I doing now? The last 2 or 3 years, I've written my first novel, and it is very much about this. The book is called That's Not How It Happened, and it is, I hope, a funny and yet poignant look at a family kind of like mine. It's not exactly my family, but it's a family. It's a mom, a dad, and 2 kids. There's a son who's about 24 with Down syndrome, and he's sort of entering into adult life, right? He's in that process of what does adult life look like for somebody with a disability.
Yeah.
And he has a younger sister who in the novel is 17 and coming up on graduating high school. And the mother and the father, in their various ways, are sort of standing on a cliff. Whenever I talk to somebody about another parent with that has a child with a disability who is coming up on 18, 19, 20 years old, without fail, they use the metaphor of a cliff because that's what it feels like, right? They go, well, we're coming up on that cliff. And I would say my novel is sort of about that cliff and about sort of what coming up on that cliff does for all of them. And the little cliffs they're all kind of standing on of like these inflection points that will lead in different directions for all 4 lives in this family. So the book is told from 4 perspectives. All 4 of the narrators are those 4 characters. It's such a huge part of my life. Writers write what they know a great deal of the time. And I thought, I need to write something and put something out in the world about this topic. And the best way to do it was for the final product to be words on a page rather than a script that a studio needs to greenlight and spend millions of dollars on, which just wasn't necessarily happening when I wrote those. So that is a very long answer, Ray. Forgive me, of what am I doing now? That was the 10-year ramp up to what am I doing now.
That's amazing. And, first of all, I love a thorough answer. Secondly, the idea of having an 18-year-old kid, period, let alone an 18-year-old kid who has disabilities, who is going into the world in this new way, like the cliff metaphor, I can feel it viscerally.
It's always the metaphor. And I wrote it into the book. I wrote it into the book that way because everyone says it that way, because it feels that way. It's such an unknown. And it's strange how we as a society don't have more and better answers for what adult lives look like for people with disabilities, right? I mean, it's hard enough sort of navigating everything educationally, everything, all of your child's health needs, health insurance, all those things that are part of childhood, IEPs, all of that stuff. But then there is some sort of a roadmap. And then sort of right around 21 and getting into that age, you start to feel like you are looking down on this cliff and you go, I don't know what's down there. We're going to take a leap of faith and see what happens. And it is really strange to me how little of a roadmap we seem to have to answer that question. It's fascinating.
I keep hearing this from parents of kids with disabilities over and over and over, that there's sort of a map or there is no map, that it feels like everyone's trying to tracing a different path, and that path is sort of terrifyingly individual and also feels very communal in this way that is like hard to explain to people who aren't part of the group.
Yes. It's very hard to explain it, that feeling.
And the idea that you wrote a book that like takes people into the experience is so beautiful to me. But I'm wondering if I can take you kind of back, because you are in this world now, and it sounds like you inhabit it so fully and are able, in a way that like I think is really rare, because I keep hearing this from parents, to bring other people in. But before you had Elliot, before you were in this group, before you were on this map, what was your relationship with disability like? Like, you started working in TV in your 20s, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
What did your relationship to the disability community look like then? Like, before you were part of this world, how did you view disability?
I didn't understand it. You know what I mean? I viewed it, I had so much naivete. I had so much ignorance. I always felt sort of a kinship with people who had disabilities. Like, I was friends with people who had disabilities in school. I didn't have some larger understanding of what it really was. Like, one of my closest friends had cerebral palsy, and he was just this awesome guy. He was very athletic. He had he limped. He had different body challenges, but he was so good at like baseball and tennis. He was amazing. He was just my friend. But I noticed as we got into junior high school and high school that people would make fun of him sometimes. And I thought to myself, this guy's a better athlete than you are, you jerks. What are you talking about? Stuff, why are and overcoming some certain challenges. But it was funny with that friend who I was friends with all the way through high school. We never talked about his disability. It was the 1980s into the 1990s. We never really talked about it or his identity or what it meant or what it felt like. He was just my friend. And I grew up too. I have a cousin who has Down syndrome. We weren't close. We didn't live in the same town, but I always loved him, and he always had a great spirit. He's still with us, and I don't know. When you have somebody in your family with a disability, I think it does make you less inclined to be a bully or to make fun of people with disabilities.
Yeah.
But it's not like it gives you, especially in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, it's not like there was some really robust, nuanced understanding of it or discussions about it.
No, not at all.
So I wouldn't say that I had a particularly deep understanding of it beyond the people I happened to know who had disabilities.
And I'm curious about what that looked like when you started in media, because I think we're in a similar age group. And
you're also 35. Great.
Yeah, I'm going to be, I've been 35 for like maybe 5-6 years. It's funny how you get there and you just
how do I have an 18-year-old and I'm 35?
It's so weird.
Anyway, it's just weird. Yeah.
I'm so glad that we're both 35. It's a great age to be.
We look amazing.
We do. In the way that like when you become conscious of something, like I have learning disabilities, but they're invisible. No one who would speak to me would necessarily know. And I was always able to mask pretty effectively. I'm a girl with ADHD, so I was not just masking, but fully missed. And in some ways that served me. But if I couldn't do something, I also have dyscalculia. I can't do math, among other things.
Yeah.
And if I was having a hard time doing something in my life, people have used the R word towards me.
Oh,
like, what
I'm
are you,
so
this?
sorry.
You know?
Right. Oh,
But
boy. Makes my blood boil. It's just makes my blood boil so much. Please keep going. I just need my blood to boil for a second.
No, allow the blood boiling and then
yeah.
That's what we bring you here for, is to just really enrage you. But, you know, I feel like at the time, it was like upsetting, but I also, like, it was such a commonly used word. And in my memory, it was pretty commonly used on television and in movies and in film, and the way people with disabilities were depicted wasn't always, I mean, and I say wasn't always, was basically never like thoughtful or sensible.
Never. Yeah, it was borderline never.
Frequently the butt of the joke. And, you know, when you started working in TV and film, like, do you remember hearing it? And I mean, I think I have like a picture of a writer's room in my mind, and it's maybe not the kindest place for...
There are those writers' rooms for sure. My writing partner, Carter, and I, we got hired at age 22 on David Letterman. So we're these kids in the mid-late 1990s, and 100% people threw around that word without thinking twice about it. I'll say this now because I've made such a crusade about this word. I wrote this essay in the Boston Globe. I have published a short story in the Iowa Review, and now I've written a novel, all of which touch upon the larger story and feeling and experience of being the parent of someone with disability, but specifically within that, the words that are used and the diminishing, dehumanizing ways that people with disabilities continue to be talked about, even in 2025. And sadly, there seems to be a real rise in the culture of talking about it that way. And I know we'll get into that, Ray, in a second. But like, to just turn it back on myself for a second so I don't sound preachy and holier than thou. I didn't scold anyone for making R-word jokes in 1997 or 2000.
No, I don't think anyone did. I mean, to my knowledge.
To my great shame, I looked back not too long ago at a screenplay, unproduced, didn't go anywhere, that Carter and I wrote that had that word in it. There was a joke where someone used that word. This is something that 25-year-old Craig thought it would be okay to put in that screenplay, not understanding anything at the time, or however old I was when I was working on that. Mm-hmm. Almost 50-year-old Craig looked at this recently, like a couple months ago. I was looking back through this old screenplay, and I found that word, and I sat with it. It was like a punch in the face. It was proof that I had used that word in the past, and that I had committed it to paper and thought it was okay, because in the late 1990s, it was a comedy word. It was an edgy comedy word. It's like a funny punchline to say. Mm-hmm. And I hate to say it. It seems like it's coming back. There are people, there are people in the culture now and in politics now dedicated to bringing this word back.
They're celebrating it. They proclaim a victory around it.
Champagne, a victory. We've reclaimed this word like something has been achieved like some great thing has happened by going back and finding this slur and saying, hey, no, we get to use a word that disparages the disability community to call anyone stupid and
Yeah.
worthless. By association, saying the disability community is stupid and
Is
worthless.
stupid and worthless.
And it's the disconnect of seeing that those go hand in hand. They say, no, it's just a funny word. It's actually not. Words do actually matter.
Yeah, they mean something.
They mean something, and they shape how we think about certain types of people,
Mhm.
right? And the other thing is, if you talk to somebody in the disability community, like I've heard wonderfully eloquent anti-R word speeches by people with Down syndrome, by people who say, I do not like how this word diminishes me. And yet the people who defend this word seem to say, no one cares. Everyone knows it's a word that's just cool and funny and comedic, and no one thinks it's related to the disability community. That's just yet another lie, because people with disabilities absolutely will tell you, no, that is a slur against my identity, like any other racial or religious epithet, slur, bigoted word. It is right, the exact same as that. There is no difference between those things. And it's very hard to convince certain people of that fact for some reason. I'll never understand why. To bring it back to myself, there was a time where I thought as a young man, apparently, I didn't even remember thinking this was true or using this word particularly much, but there it was staring me in the face in the screenplay. And I really almost burst into tears when I saw it, because my son is now 18, and I've spent 18 years really reprogramming my mind and soul and just seeing the world so differently. My son was born in 2007, which is still quite a while ago, and I think a lot has been learned about how to talk about disability since then, and certainly since the late 1990s. But I remember going into my writer's room after my son was born and thinking, I've got to tell people, you cannot make jokes like this around me anymore. And I had to explain that. The How I Met Your Mother writer's room was full of all big-hearted, wonderful people. I don't know that that word was ever tossed around in that way in that writer's room. It was a really wonderful writer's room. They're not all like that. Yeah. But just because I know comedy writers do play it fast and loose and throw around terms, and I just didn't even want to risk that anyone would think it was okay to say that word around me, starting from my son's birth. And I guess it's one of those you don't know till you know kind of things.
I think a lot when you say the How I Met Your Mother's writer's room was a kind and like loving place. In large part, it sounds like because you made it that way. And I can only assume that's why that show resonated with so many people. But I keep coming back to this idea of like, we hear a lot about it. And from the people who are celebrating using this word or being able to use it again as if they ever stopped in the first place.
Right.
Is, it's transgressive. It's funny. It's edgy. And I'm interested from like your media perspective, like this concept of, I don't know, like it's like punching down, like the shock value thing. Like
it is punching down.
Yeah.
Comedy at its best does not punch down. It's not what it's about. That is not why it exists. As a mode of expression, it's not bullying. Comedy is not bullying. Comedy is thought-provoking. Comedy is satirical. Comedy is you looking at the world and commenting on it through in a way that maybe no one else could, but save through a comedic lens. But boy, is it not bullying. Boy, is it not being mean. Edgy comedy. And this was a thing like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I think it's coming back. Edgy comedy is almost never funny, in my opinion. We're doing this rewatch podcast for How I Met Your Mother. Josh Radnor had this idea. He said, look, it's been 20 years since the show launched, which is insane. 20 years in September of 2025 will be the 20-year anniversary from the launch. And it was
when I was 15 years old.
Well played. That's what we call a callback. See, that's clever comedy. That's not edgy punching down, bullying, crappy comedy. That was called clever. We are rewatching, and it's about 10 years since it went off the air. So it was these two round numbers, 10 and 20, and Josh said, let's do this rewatch podcast. And so we're doing it. And I hadn't rewatched the show in years. And mostly the show is it is the most emo sitcom of all time. It is it wears its heart on its sleeve. It plays like a soap opera. It plays like an hour drama. It's serialized. It's a weird beast because it looks like a sitcom, but it's kind of not. I say these all as things I love about the show. I'm not saying it is bad. I think that's why the show.
No, I think
work.
These are all marks.
I think those are all what. I think that's what that's what was special and unique about the show. You've got to find what's your thing. What do you do better than other shows? And you say, this is our thing. And you commit to it. As a result, it is mostly not edgy comedy. But I will say this, we're only like 10, 12 episodes into the rewatch. I've already caught a few moments from 2005 where there's some joke where I go, I wouldn't do that joke today. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I wouldn't do exactly that joke. Maybe I wouldn't say that word. There's just a couple of times where like the word transvestite is used to describe
Mhm.
like there's a transvestite hooker out on the street, like that's painting a picture of a crazy scene at 3 a.m. in New York. It wasn't meant to be insulting to that
Uh-huh.
community, but it's singling out that word. It was using that word in a way to say like, how crazy is New York at 3 a.m. or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I look at it, it's like, that's sort of cheap and edgy. You're just saying that word because that word feels edgy. This is me again. I
Mhm.
don't know why this podcast is I'm just doing mea culpas on this podcast now. But I think it's
That's
important.
why we bring
I
people
want.
on.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is you you don't know. You do have to evolve. You do have to learn as you go.
Yes.
Even this open-hearted show that is full of love, How I Met Your Mother. We had a few moments as younger comedy writers, 30 years old when we launched the show, where we didn't realize some of those words, maybe you don't need to say those words as a part of a punchline of a joke.
Mhm.
Even if it wasn't your intention to insult somebody with that identity, it's still, you're name checking this word in this comedic way that isn't actually comedic. The point I'm trying to make here is the couple of moments like that I've found so far rewatching the show, the jokes are not worth it. They're not funny. There was a better joke to say there.
Yes.
That's my biggest thing. It's not actually funny. It's
Yeah.
some stunt double of what people mistake to be funny, and it's not. And these guys like Joe Rogan and Elon Musk and these guys championing, bringing back from the nearly dead the R word,
The
as
R
if
word and
they've,
measles.
as if they, as if that has achieved anything. And they are both very contagious. Both of the two things you just
Yes.
named are contagious, and people hear it, and all their little followers hear it, and they think this is an okay thing to say now. And that anyone that tells you different, that says don't use the R word, is woke and stupid. And
Sensitive.
when I very mistakenly sometimes engage with people online about this topic, you better believe that their second or third move they have is to call you the R word right back. You're the R word for saying I can't use the R word. And you're like, buddy, I don't know how to continue this discussion from here.
guess we're at an impasse, my friend.
Yeah, I guess you win in
But
your
this is like
mind.
a thing I think about a lot. And it's kind of the thing that made me want to have these conversations in the first place, which is like, how do we take people who think this is funny or feel like it's just like, people say they can't do it, they want to do it even more, and
Yeah.
they just are so divorced from like what it actually means, what the impact really is.
Yeah.
This thing, it's a question that keeps coming back to me, which is like, you'll hear people be like, well, it's free speech, like I just want to use free speech and like say what I feel. And it's like,
Right.
to me, of course you have free speech, but that is lazy speech.
Yes.
You could find another word, like you're saying. You could you could evolve, even if you said it before. You don't
Yeah.
have to cleave to the thing you've always been. You can change.
There are really colorful, wonderful ways to describe something that is absurd, stupid, ridiculous, hypocritical, hapless. There are so many funny ways to talk about those things without resorting to this incredibly easy, punching down, useless, like outdated way of calling
Yes.
something those things. Challenge yourself to be more specific.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you think that word even means? Like, and also like, I think how do you get someone to stop saying this word? I don't know, because I engage with people sometimes in social media, and it once or twice, maybe a handful of times, people have said, you made me think twice about this. I hear what you're saying. Well, okay, I'll share why those exchanges worked, I think. Because I said, this is very hurtful to me. Because sometimes it would be with like fans of How I Met Your Mother, even, or people that were engaging with me on some other issue. And I'd say, look, if you like any of the work I've done, I just want you to know I am a human being. I love my son more than anything in the world. And this word is a slur against an aspect of his humanity and his identity and a journey he's on. Think about it. He didn't ask for extra learning challenges in life. He didn't want that, but he has that, and he has to overcome that. And he deserves respect for that. And to use words, these lazy prepackaged words that equate having a disability with the abstract concept of just stupidity,
Yeah.
worthlessness, haplessness. If you're saying those two things are the same, they're not. You're really hurting my feelings because my son is so important to me. So the times I've made it personal are the times when I've had it work. But then if you make it personal and the person still says, F you, you're the R word, it hurts even more because now you feel like you
Yeah.
kind of opened your heart to that person and like it didn't work and they just sort of like stabbed the dagger in a little deeper. But the times it's worked are the times I've made it personal. I see this word coming up a lot online, and social media, and it's thrown around in political discussions a lot. There is, I see it a lot in that sort of way where people say libtard, you know what I mean? Equating, there's sort
Yeah.
of this like, let me take your what I perceive to be your political beliefs and equate it with that. I see all these different ways people are trying to bring it back. And I think to myself, if they had somebody in their life that they loved who had a disability and said to them, it really hurts my feelings when you use this, it really diminishes me and disparages me. That might be the only way to get through to somebody like that. I think there's a lot, I notice this phenomenon a lot where people only understand something abstract when it comes into their life in reality and specifically.
Yes.
So the challenge seems to be, if somebody doesn't have that in their life, you have to talk about it in a way that makes it visceral, emotional, and real to them. And that takes a lot of trust because you're opening something up in your heart. If I talk about my son to somebody and they still insult me with the R word and say, you're just woke and screw off, that hurts more because I shared something of myself with that person. But I think you have to have an open heart and you have to try to talk to people about how it feels and that we are all human beings. We all have value. This is a word that devalues. This is a way of talking about disability that devalues people. People with disabilities are human. They have parents and families who are humans and love them and deserve respect and decency and humanity, dignity. And I just think the only times I have felt a level of success in engaging with people is when I make it personal to them in some way.
Yeah.
And of course, I've now written a whole novel that I hope does that, and I hope it does it in a funny way. It's actually it's mostly a comedic novel, and I find that comedy, the right kind of comedy, can disarm people and open them up. And I hope that I found a way of writing about it in my book that might open a few minds and might make people realize, oh, I see why this matters. I see what this is.
This makes so much sort of sense to me as a constellation of things where it's like, if the comedy that punches down and is shock value and that's isolating, right? You're pushing people out.
Yeah.
The kind of things that you create pull people in. And it also, like when you say, because I can relate very much to the feeling of having to make the thing that hurts personal in order to have other people care. Like one of the questions that comes to me over and over and over as I do this work is, how do you get people to care about things that don't affect them?
Yep.
One of the only ways that I've seen that happen is through media, is through art, TV, books. You become intimately acquainted with characters that are not, real people, but they feel very real to you.
Yeah.
And when you talk about writing the book, it's almost like, because I do feel like as people in the disability community, we do what you're saying. We have to kind of lay ourselves bare over and over and over and say, like, please care. Please care about this.
Yes.
Please.
And it's exhausting, right?
Acknowledge
It's
my
emotionally
humanity.
depleting to do it sometimes, but there's almost no other way. Right.
So it's like you have to like kind of like throw open your chest and be like, look, I'm a person. Just give some amount of care, as the Southerners say. Give a care. And, but like that wears you out. It's tiring and you have to do it on a lot of fronts and in a lot of ways. And for me, when I see something like your book or like that piece, which was so beautiful in the Globe, there's this beautiful level of removal. You're making people care. You're making it personal through art. So it's almost like you have a screen in front of you. But you're still bringing people in. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, what responsibility do media, do art have in this world? Because it feels to me like that's the biggest stage you can do this on.
Huge responsibility. That's why I feel like we have to be out there. That's why I'm so glad you're doing this podcast. That's why I'm trying to write stuff about it. I think it's a huge responsibility. I think when people can be engaged on a human level, the way that an honest conversation in this podcast space could do, the way that I hope my book can do, the way I hope that piece art for the Boston Globe did.
Yes.
It has to be on a human level, I think. I think when it's abstract, people can swat it away and it remains abstract. So much of human life now in 2025 is abstract. It's digital. It feels at a remove, right? It doesn't feel real. And so it's, how do you make it human? How do you make it visceral? How do you give it a beating heart? And I think that's the huge challenge. That Boston Globe piece I wrote was kind of admitted to my own ignorance a bit in ways that I've done in this interview too, where it sort of takes you through this journey of like, I became the parent of a kid with disabilities. And I was in Hollywood and I was trying to figure out how to make the disability parenthood part of my life fit the Hollywood part of my life. And I wrote about the ways that it didn't fit, right? I wrote about ways that I felt very lonely and unseen in Hollywood. I felt, and I didn't know how to talk about it myself. And then retrospectively, I think about if I could go back in time, I would I would have cast roles on How I Met Your Mother more often with people with disabilities. I would have made that visible on my show. I was so young. I was in my 30s. I didn't know how to be the parent of a kid with a disability, right? I had no knowledge, and I was trying to run that TV show and raise my son, and I wasn't coming at it with this higher level of awareness and like realizing I should try to incorporate this into my work and make this visible and emotional, palpable, real in my work. I thought they were two separate things. And now I realize that's not true, and I'm trying to make art and writing about this now, about this topic. But when I was doing How I Met Your Mother, I didn't know how. And so that Boston Globe essay, I sort of call myself out a little bit and say, I wish I could go back in time and hire writers with disabilities and cast roles. But I didn't, I was not doing 3D thinking. I was so day to day, just trying to like be there for my son and run this TV show. And it was, I'll admit, it was like all too hard for me to think on that higher level. But now I'm trying more to think on that higher level and say, how can you put things out there in the world that humanize this? How can you use whatever your little talents or skill sets are, whatever your ability to communicate is? How do we do that? How do we make it human? How do we make it a felt experience for people? Because if it stays abstract, people can insult and diminish and swat away things in the abstract that when they are face to face with it and it feels real, even if it's a novel, even if it's fictional, but if it feels real and these feel like real people, you can't dismiss it and disparage it so easily.
You have to see the whole person.
You have to see the whole person. And I wanted to ask you, Ray, like, what did it feel like to you getting that word thrown at you? What did that feel like? Did that feel like did you know, I don't know when you got your diagnosis or when you like, to what extent you felt you were like hiding and then people would say something to you. It must have been like really shocking and horrible to have someone say something like that to you.
It felt like getting caught.
Oh,
it felt like getting caught.
Wow.
And you would just but you also kind of do the thing, like, and I think everybody at a young age does this when somebody says something that hurts you, right? You just kind of like, oh, this kind of like shambling, brush it off, wiggle away from it.
Yeah.
But for me, I knew that I was like not like the others. I was one of these things that was not like the others. I have ADHD. I have dyscalculia. As a kid, I also had dysgraphia. I couldn't write. My spatial awareness is not great.
Yeah.
But I could always cover.
Yeah.
So when somebody would say like, what are you, that, I would think like, oh my God, I didn't do it well enough. I would freeze and feel like I had been seen in a way that was not the way I wanted to be.
Did you literally have those diagnoses or those sort of like categories or labels to put on it at that time? No, right?
No.
You knew that you had challenges. Maybe your parents knew, but you felt like you're just going to have to fit in because I'm assuming if we're contemporary ages that there was not much support or much recognition or much conversation on the levels that you would have needed it or that you would hopefully get today if you were a teenager today. But I'm assuming you felt very lonely and like hiding in the woods.
I felt very lonely, yes. And also, I mean, I was lucky enough, I have enough privilege to have been diagnosed at 21, which for a woman is frankly pretty early.
Right.
But I failed out of school. I mean, I like crashed and burned in every conceivable way.
Yeah.
If you were to look at like, what are the negative consequences of having learning disabilities on paper and being undiagnosed? Like you could basically read my story up to about age 21.
Yeah.
But that word for me, and one of the things that I struggle with even in this conversation is when I'm like, I'm part of the disability community because I was able to pass, because it wasn't something that I had to wear all the time. I feel sometimes like I'm like an imposter within that space. Like, I could hide it. So do I really get to call myself disabled in this? Like, to me, that feels like an inclusive word. I'm part of this wonderful community that is like a privilege to be part of.
Right.
But I worry sometimes that when I use it, I'm like, my friend used to call it for other things, fake the funk. Like so it's a tricky word in that way of if you have an invisible disability, you both relate to it and experience it, but in a way that I think also when we hear from people with Down syndrome, or we hear from people who have clear disabilities that are like physically obvious, most of them say they've never had that word said to them
Yeah.
because of
Yeah,
what you're
that's
talking
interesting.
about.
Right.
People don't Most people don't think of themselves as the kind of person who would show up and call someone who had a visible disability the R word, but they're
Yeah.
perfectly happy to use it online or use it towards somebody who they don't realize is in
Yes.
the club.
That is also fascinating. You saying you felt caught in that moment is just like so heartbreaking. And in terms of like your identity, I mean, to me, I'm the parent of a child with a disability, and I write about this sometimes. I sometimes feel that way too. Like, you know, do I have a right to write about this topic? I'm only the parent of somebody with a disability. It's somebody who I love more than anything in the world. But I think we all have that imposter syndrome, Ray, of like, what is our what authority or authenticity do we have to talk about these things? But
Yeah.
to me, for what it's worth, you you're doing a beautiful thing by talking about all of this and your journey, and you are part of that community, and you're using your talents and your voice to talk about it, and that makes you a part of the community, and you already were too. So it's like
Thanks.
you should not overthink that, right? We all need each other in this conversation, and we are up against a culture that views people with disabilities in really ignorant, dismissive ways
Yeah.
sometimes, and in ways that are invisible to them. Like, I think the argument for the R word is sometimes like it's just a funny word. I'm not thinking of a person with disability when I say that. The problem is, it does hurt the feelings of people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Like, you're not running around saying a racial epithet in public because you know somebody's going to take huge issue with it and say, why did you just say that word? And so if that community says it hurts them, which they do say that, then the argument that it's just this word that's been abstracted and now it's just a funny word and nobody cares, people care. Guess what?
People care.
People do care.
It does
So that
matter.
argument holds no water, I think.
Can I ask you, because were so kind and validating just then, and I want to return it a little bit. As a parent, you said, I wish I'd known more when you were doing the show and you just had Elliot and you were trying to figure out how you could bring those two things together. That is a wildly intense experience to go through for anyone, even if there's nothing going on with your kid, even if your job is a simple job. It's a lot to have a baby and then a
Yeah.
growing child and a job. So I just want to validate that
Thank
was,
you.
I don't think you need to be like, God, I wish I had been better, because although we always and always do, right, as parents, as people. But I do want to like ask, as a parent now, like, you have all this perspective and Elliot's 18, and what are you excited about for him? Like, and on the flip side of that, like, what's keeping you up at night as the parent of a child who's going out into this world?
Great question. Thank you for that comment. I do still for that supportive comment. I mean, I do still look. I want to say one thing on that because I do still look back on it. I'll try not to beat myself up too much, but I regret that I had a certain kind of platform that I probably could have used to talk about it more. But you want to know the truth, Ray? I think I was masking a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I was like, well, we'll see what happens. I wasn't like fully embracing it. He has a rare syndrome. I don't know exactly which way it's going to go. There was some level of like denial or not fully embracing what was happening or not being able to compute it well enough to know how to write about it or talk about it. I was sort of slowly sharing it in my personal life with people. But it is an unknown road, a rare genetic syndrome. There aren't that many people with Jacobsen syndrome in the world. And even within that population, there's a lot of different manifestations of it. 50% of people with Jacobsen syndrome have some sort of heart problem. The other 50% don't. That is a testament to the complicated
Mhm.
cocktail of the human genome. Why I'm missing basically the same parts of the 11th chromosome. They're just more or less. Do some people's hearts not sort of form correctly, but others do? It's sort of incredibly fascinating. That's why there's this amazing doctor that studies Jacobsen syndrome, Dr. Paul Grossfeld, that is like the beacon of light to that community, and like he's the reason for
Oh,
so much of the published medical literature. His research, I do a lot of fundraising to support his research. Um, and he's amazing. But at that time, I didn't know. Didn't know exactly what it was going to be, right? And I didn't talk about it that much. And I think that was my way of being a little bit like, I'm just sailing under the radar. I don't want people to see me or see my
uh-huh.
son this certain way, like as if there's some kind of hiding from it or some kind of need to hide from it. There was something resisting it in my mind, like resisting sharing it wider than the small handful of people on How I Met Your Mother and my friends. And I think I don't know. It reminded me of that feeling like when you said you got caught or something, like the moment where like you have to sort of embrace this hard thing, right?
Yeah.
That's hard to share with the world, and you feel vulnerable doing it, but you sort of grow into that role, I guess. Hopefully, I guess I'm trying to. But yeah, so that's me when Elliot's a baby. Here I am, he's 18. In between, I feel like I've learned so much, so much. Um, he's amazing. He has taught me everything important to know. Um, he is the most musical person I've ever met.
Oh
He
yeah.
is this wonderfully musical soul. So imagine that this is a guy who he has a lot of fine and gross motor skill delays and problems with spatial relationships and their safety issues around that. This is a guy who he can't button a button. He can't really do handwriting, but he can play Led Zeppelin on the drums. He can
What?
play Radiohead on the drums. He can play the Pixies on the drums. Basically, I've indoctrinated him to think it's
I was going to say that's
1996.
pretty good music choices across
Pearl
the
Jam
board.
is his biggest one. I should say Pearl Jam. He's basically like a dad rocker at age 18. He's like,
Can you do the Eddie Vedder voice to like back it up though?
not in public, I can't. If you walk by my house at the wrong moment, you might hear it and go, "What is happening inside
And what's
there?"
your address?
What? But so I taught him, I'm a drummer. I taught him drums. He got so good at the drums, I got kicked off the drums. And now I just play guitar and sing and pretend to be Eddie Vedder at times. And we probably play like 50, 70 songs together. We have like this catalog. And so this is a guy, drumming is hard. You have 4 different limbs doing 4 different things.
Yeah, I can't do it at all.
He can do that, but he can't button a button. Zippering a zipper was in the last couple of years. He got that. This is all to say one wonderful word, I think, to describe, and not wonderful, an accurate word to describe him. When people say, well, what word would the atypical learner idea is fairly applicable to him. He just has these different challenges and these different huge strengths. And it is so interesting to watch that journey. He's funny, he's sweet, he's musical, and he just played drums in the pit band for his school musical. I'm basically in a band with my son, and we do a How I Met Your Mother based fundraiser concert for that amazing doctor I just talked about, who's research. So we've done it 3 times now. If anyone's in New York, please follow me on social media.
That's so cool.
And check this out, because we do it once a year, and we have actors from the cast of How I Met Your Mother come. We have musicians whose music we used on How I Met Your Mother. At this past one, we had Josh Radnor and Will Forte and the lead singer of Nada Surf and an amazing lineup of people. Of all those stars and celebrities, Elliot was the star of the night, because I got him out and he played drums on 4 songs with us in front of 650 people. We packed the Bowery Ballroom. But that, if you're asking what are those moments of joy? What are those moments I wish I could go back in time? How I Met Your Mother was a very time jumpy show, right? We jumped to flashback, flash forward, blah, blah. If I could flash back to when my son was just born, and I thought, how am I going to do this? How are we going to do this? How is my wife going to do this? How are we all going to do this? If I could have had a crystal ball and gone back now, I'm 50 basically, and I go back with a crystal ball and I just get to give like 30-year-old Craig or whatever, 32-year-old Craig, just one glimpse in a crystal ball. It might be Elliot playing drums in front of 650 people at Bowery Ballroom with a full band, including professional musicians.
Oh.
And honestly killing it, honestly nailing it. He is so rock steady. He was so great. I was up on guitar singing those songs. We did a few comedy songs from How I Met Your Mother that Carter and I wrote, and I messed up the lyrics at one point, and he was rock steady. I totally blanked on some lyrics. I had to like vamp for a second.
God.
And he was rock steady and just so I was so proud of him. And just one of those things you're like, I just wish I could have seen that moment. And that could be any number of moments for any number of people, but those gifts you can't imagine when you're catastrophizing and you're worst case scenarioing and you're reading the Google page about the genetic syndrome and reading every worst thing and going, all of those are going to be in my son. And then what you realize, again, coming back to humanizing people, then you look at the human being that is your child and you realize this is a human being. There's a lot of factors here. Yes, he's missing a little piece of one of his 11th chromosomes, but he's him. He is him. He's not reducible to a WebMD page of symptoms. He is not reducible to the R word. He is not reducible to anything, because he is a beautiful human being. And he's sorry.
No, you're gonna make me cry.
He's gonna be more than anybody could ever imagine. He's gonna be himself, and he cannot be reduced to any one thing. That's the gift of it. The challenge of it is wanting the world to see him that way. And now that he's 18, I want him to go out in the world and be seen with that sort of robust, generous, open-minded approach rather than something reductive. And that how his next few years will go and what his education will be and how that will all work is that stuff keeps me up at night, and it's a lot of problems to solve. And like I said at the beginning of the conversation, it's strange how much it is in the wilderness, and it's each person you talk to who's gone through it, it's the parents who've gone through it, trying to devise sort of next steps for their child or collaboratively with their child. Everyone is doing an improv game. There's just everyone's like, well, we did this for a couple of years and we figured this out. Then we found this thing where it's this company that has people who have disabilities and they welcome them. And then we did that for a couple. It's all like this constant game of improvisation.
Of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Got emotional there.
No,
it's funny. You can tell there's just so much in this conversation. There's a lot, right? There's a lot. We're looking ahead at a lot, and all of this is in my book. And this is like I'm trying to channel all of those fears that keep you up at night and find how can I make this funny? How can I make this human? How can I write about this in a way that people will relate to, whether or not they're in this experience? Because I think the experience of being a parent and being in a family, my book is about being a parent and being in a family. It is a family with one of the members has a disability, but I think every parent, there's this great quote that I love that, like, I'll get wrong now, but parenthood is letting your heart come out of your body and walk around. Yeah,
it's when your heart lives outside.
When your heart lives out, yeah. And it's like, that's parenthood. That's all parenthood. Yeah. That's not disability-based parenthood. That is all parenthood.
So accurate.
And what is the future for your child? How can you make the best future for your child? That is just universal. All of our parents wanted that for us, and if and when we become parents, we want that for our children. Yeah. That is universal. That's what my book's about, and that's what keeps me up at night. But it's also, my son has shown me time and again that I don't have to be so afraid, and that he can do so much. And there's a lot of gifts in this journey.
I love that. He sounds like just an amazing guy.
He's a really good guy.
And I love that you just want him to be seen. I don't know. This is how we all feel, right? We want our kids to be seen as whole people just for the wonder that they are.
Yes. And I'll say this one other thing about that idea of passing or masking. In the last year or so, my son has lost all his hair. It's a very rare syndrome of a very rare symptom of Jacobsen syndrome, like almost to the point where, like, is it a symptom? We know a couple other people with Jacobsen syndrome this happened to. And so he's completely bald. His eyebrows are mostly gone. He looks different than he used to, right? And he instantly looks more different than he ever did, if that makes sense. He's more recognizable instantly as someone that has something medical going on or something disability-based going on. He's more instant. Like, I think people see him differently than they did a year ago, right? And it's so interesting, that idea of masking or being caught or whatever it is. Because I miss him having his hair, because his hair was beautiful. And every now and again he goes, I wish I still had my hair. Other times he goes, I'm just like the drummer of Radiohead, Phil Selway. He's bald and he's awesome. And I'm like, yes, he is bald and he's awesome. It's interesting now to go through the world with him and people look at him differently than they used to. But also I think it's good, because it's like, let me embrace that new piece, right? Each new piece, each new chapter, each new part of this, you've got to wrap your arms around it and go, like, this is what it is. And we will figure out life like this now. And it's not really going to change that much. And maybe it'll make everything more honest. Maybe it'll make everything, maybe we'll discover gifts in that we didn't know about. So it's just interesting, that idea. The idea that there should ever be any masking or shaming or hiding or passing is it's so unfortunate that anybody ever has to feel that way. And I think that circles all the way back to the way we talk about and think about disability in America, in the world, what words we use, the space we make to be either inclusive or exclusive, disincluding people, diminishing people, using derogatory terms. There's no one would feel the need to hide or pass or feel shame if we were in a society that didn't use things like the R word, and that instead said,
let us be people.
How do we include? How do we open up the world? How do we make a space in our society for everybody?
Craig's upcoming novel is called That's Not How It Happened. It comes out this fall and is available for pre-order now. You can find a link to that and Craig's podcast, How We Made Your Mother, in the show notes.